There's a very interesting thing that I've noticed on Pearl's show versus, like, for example, Myron's, where people are very willing on her show to interrupt her, whereas people are pretty hesitant on Myron's show to interrupt him. And in most live debates that I see, people are pretty hesitant to overstep the moderator too much. I have my own thoughts about that, but I'd be curious if you had any thoughts as to like why. And I don't think it's as simple as just like, well, she's a woman. I want a day where you and Keffals are friends, and I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, I thought about it because now she's trying to like bridge build with me. I really don't know how I feel about everything. I feel like in a post-Max Lav world.
Don't say that. Don't, please publicly don't even say that. How much does Mac's situation map onto, like, for example, what happened between you and Hasan or you and Ian?
I had like a 4-hour chat with him like 2 nights ago. And I was like, this is so stupid. Like, I don't know why I didn't figure this out on my own. So interpersonally, I have problems. The thing with Max that I should have leaned on really hard was the...
Sweet
how do you
baby
feel
child.
about the statement, like,
Oof.
men and women's roles have kind of like changed throughout history, and like the gender norms and all of that are assigned like socially, et cetera.
I think it's an extremely unsophisticated look at history, is how I kind of feel about it. I've been harping about this. My stream is going to kill me because I've said this like 16 times today. I think gender roles emerged out of like some level of like necessity and some element of like biological proclivity. The issue is that like the whole point of the gender roles traditionally and historically, not that they always played out because people are stupid and we're very rigid, but the purpose of them was to maximize what people are good at and minimize what they're bad at, right? And so like, am I answering your question?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like I just don't like the statement because I don't think it's very true at all, and I feel like it misses a lot of what's going on.
You don't like the statement because you think it's completely like gender roles are just not socially constructed at all?
I think they're socially constructed.
Yeah.
But they like that construction probably maps out into something kind of real, right?
Yes. Yes.
Like for instance, like the idea of like a construction worker. That's probably not like a category that's found in the universe. That's a socially constructed thing. But if you've got a dimorphic species and one tends to like be physically stronger than the other, then that's probably going to be the one that occupies that socially constructed class, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even when you look at things like construction workers, there's going to be a whole bunch of biological markers that are going to like predilect certain types of individuals to select construction work even as their primary mode of like work versus something else. Like there's a reason, not always, but there's a oftentimes strongly like personality types, right? Like men who are going to be less educated and interested in education are going to be much more interested in pursuing things like labor trades because they just don't have it. And that's somewhat going to be driven by their, for example, like openness to experience, which seems to be decently biologically driven.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. Just curious. I just got the end of that panel. I don't know last time I heard somebody say that again.
You lose.
Society, changes our social blah, 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 some bullshit. You know what I mean?
Well, there's this, it's something that we have to contend with, which is that I don't know how we say they're wholly socially constructed when universally most cultures have emerged with very similar gender constructions. There's some differences, right? Like skirts and clothes and unimportant stuff, but things like child rearing versus labor, hunting, and like tribal warfare have always been clearly gendered and separated in almost all cultures. Yeah,
I think the key word that a lot of people miss is, or the key concept philosophically is that just because something is socially constructed, Vaush this up all the time. Just because something is socially constructed doesn't mean it's arbitrary. And a lot of people mix those two things up.
Yeah, like the fact that this is something that's actually more interesting work from like evolutionary anthropology or evopsych, which is looking at, like, this is evopsych at its best, which is looking at universally emergent social constructions and asking ourselves why almost every single successful culture arose to these things, right? This is a really interesting conversation in evopsych with patriarchy, right? It's not self-evident why specifically patriarchies emerged almost universally in almost all successful cultures. Like, why were patriarchies selected for it and matriarchies were not? Because there was unquestionably cultures that had matriarchies, but most of them got dominated probably by patriarchal societies. Like, why is this the case? Which is a really interesting question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
That's all.
What else? How do you feel it went?
Which one? Your chat with Pearl?
What?
Your chat with Pearl?
Oh no! Why did you watch that today?
Yeah, I watched it today. Bro, I can't figure this girl out. Is she just dumb, or is she grifting really hard?
No,
I guess you probably don't want to say.
Why would I not want to say?
I don't know if you want to burn the bridge. I don't know if you want to burn the bridge.
Oh, that is true. You know, I do have a reputation for being like very cordial and not.
I thought you were on a new arc, Steny, of leaving Nebraska Steve behind.
That was last year. This year is supposed to be being a little bit more brutal than normal, I think.
Oh, really? 2023 is the year of blood rage?
Not blood rage, just standing up for what I believe in. Fuck me. I should have waited until I finished this game of Pokemon. I'm so sorry.
Are you playing League right now?
No, I'm playing StarCraft.
Oh, yeah, people were so excited. Do you want me to just entertain chat for like 2 seconds? I can just take questions.
Relevant things to say. I'm trying to remember what they were. He's on 3 bases. He's on Mac. This is so fucking stupid. I hate these fucking players. Wait, what? That's not feedback. That's not even real. So what was your overall?
Yeah. Okay, I've noticed. Okay, a couple of interesting psych things. So not even psych things, just behavioral stuff. So I've noticed that when she's feeling backed into a corner, specifically by you, she does like this consistent like
Oh yeah, that's stupid fucking.
But I had a thought while I was listening to this, which is when I think about the different panel shows that I've seen that are live, right? Like Myron and Pearl and a couple of other people that do it. There's a very interesting thing that I've noticed on Pearl's show versus, like, for example, Myron's, where people are very willing on her show to interrupt her, whereas people are pretty hesitant on Myron's show to interrupt him. And in most live debates that I see, people are pretty hesitant to overstep the moderator too much. I'm curious, like, I have my own thoughts about that, but I'd be curious if you had any thoughts as to like why. And I don't think it's as simple as just like, well, she's a woman. I don't really
I think it's
that's
tempting to do the woman thing, but I think it probably has more to do with the fact that she's relatively passive. And I think from what she said to me, she said that was the first show where they've ever kicked anybody off before, ever.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Okay, hold on. Can I just, for my own safety, who are we allowed to call bro here and who are we not allowed to call bro? I just want to know.
Get the fuck out. Lock the door. Blessing, go lock the other side too. Blessing, lock the fuck. Yo, the only reason was because she kept interrupting me. Jesus Christ. Look, I don't. Oh my god. What? Can you go check? Just go double check. Go.
No, but okay, that's fair enough. But listen, look at the difference.
That has never I've never had anyone lock off or kicked out.
I think best is we move on quick.
But think about it. What did I actually say that was disrespectful to her?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she's saying I was disrespectful to her. How?
So I wonder if she's gotten interrupted a lot in the past and she just doesn't do anything about it. Because if she doesn't do anything about it, then you would expect to see that type of behavior flourish, right?
Yeah. One thing I've been thinking about, so you know people who, like, when you're in a group setting, they get interrupted all the time, like probably more than on average. But those people that get interrupted when they're talking to you about it, it's like this awkward thing where, like, I agree that you get interrupted more, but sometimes it's because, like, you ain't saying anything anyone wants to listen to. Have you ever, like, noticed that?
That can happen, yeah.
I don't know how to talk about people with that.
Oh, well,
I think a lot of times with Pearl, it's very interesting. What I noticed with Pearl specifically with her panelists is when she was debating you and like talking back, like giving her own opinions, people were very quick to interrupt her. But the moment she said, "So I have a question," almost everyone quieted right away. So it like showed me that the group is hearing her the whole time. They were just deciding when they cared or didn't care to like hear what she had to say. And I'm not just trying to pick on Pearl. It's like something I've been thinking about for a little while, like even in my own Discord community of like, what do I do about people that always get talked over, but part of why they're getting talked over is because like nobody wants to listen to them. I don't know how to communicate that to somebody because it's very harsh and not the best news to get, obviously. Other than that, yeah, I mean, I think you did really well. It was very funny seeing you be in between the fighting.
You don't know who you're talking to. Be careful.
I like the riz that you're attempting with the outfit change. It's interesting to see. Did you decide aesthetic matters? You've convinced yourself? Or was it
A little
Mel's
bit,
doing?
just because I have to fight so hard against the blue hair, so now I have to like compensate in another area. So I'll probably, for at least as long as I have this, I'll probably have a wardrobe and shit.
Really? Just until you get rid of the blue hair?
I guess it depends. I mean, if I already have the clothes, I'll probably hold on to them a little bit. Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Okay.
Why, is that a problem? Oh.
Well, I just think it's like one area that I've always been kind of confused about your platform, because I think you would agree that the aesthetic you communicate to people really matters, right? And that aesthetic is communicated in a ton of ways, which is the way you talk, your body language, all that sort of thing. But it's obviously visual as well, right? Like the clothing you're wearing, the hairstyle you have, all that sort of stuff. And I know you don't
it's just a matter
care
of,
about
like,
it.
how far you want to go, or like what kind of values I'm trying to reinforce with it. Because I also, I do like the idea of being relatively unassuming. And then exceeding those expectations, like that's a fun.
Yeah. Other than that, no, I thought your performance on Pro was good, but the lawyer debate was mind-boggling to me. Oh my gosh! The last thing I expected from the Tate defense corner would be systemic racial oppression. That was wild.
Yeah, people definitely pay attention to those systems when they're on the receiving end of getting f***ed by them. So. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know how you watch that as a viewer. Like that alone to me would be enough to be like, okay, I don't know if I can like buy into this worldview, because that's been in the past. Like inconsistencies like this is what's like led me out of like being like a fundy Christian, for example, or like other shit. Like when I was like 18, I was like a young earther and stuff like that. And it's just like, then you come across just like evidence that makes no sense. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's ridiculous. I can't understand. I've been trying to figure out like why people think the way that they do in such a like partisan way. Mm-hmm. And do you think that as a society, there's because we taught critical thinking in school for a really long time. But
did we?
Yeah, well, we named it critical thinking.
What did we actually teach in critical?
Well, it would be like things like, what does this essay say? Like, read this piece of thing, and like, what is it arguing for? And you know, like we were trying to teach kids like how to formulate arguments back, but it feels like it was just an abysmal failure.
I feel like I did that in English.
Yeah, and social studies. At least I did it in social.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions I have when I'm talking
diamond,
to
people. Diamond hands.
Shut the fuck up. There's a lot of questions I have when I'm arguing with people, and I argue, like, if you had to write an essay to argue for something in school, like, this wouldn't cut it. You know that, right? Like, I don't understand sometimes when I'm talking to people. I think I went to a way better high school than I thought, or people just forget everything out of high school, or they just never learn critical thinking at all. Like, yeah, I have no idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way that, to some extent, a society could systematize not just teaching people like what to think. Like it felt like a lot of critical thinking came down to just like teaching kids to have a certain opinion, which is like graded on, but like instead teaching people how to think. And I think the lawyer debate was a really good example of this to me, because it was so unequivocally clear that you won the debate, even just like even at a rhetorical level, right? Even if you disagreed with what you said, like it was demonstrably clear. And yet in the like comment section, you'll see people just like coping. Like eventually I think TGG took over the comment section and it like changed. But originally it was like comments like, well, winners and losers in debates don't really matter. It's about like the true argument. And, you know, the lawyer had the truer argument and stuff like this, where it's just like, I can't fathom the cope required to watch that. But most people, when they watch debates, they go, person saying things I like, they must be right.
Yeah, I'm not sure. When you talk about like the critical thinking thing, I don't know. It feels like such a stupid conversation to have because everybody thinks they do it, right? Mm-hmm. No, actually, I'm walking back from that statement. I don't believe that anymore. I used to say everybody thinks they're right, but I something that I lean more heavily into is usually I'll have a conversation with someone. I'll ask them like, what do you do to make sure you're not like stuck like in a stupid thought loop or whatever? And I find that a lot of people don't have answers to that. And I hope that when I ask them that question, it gives them pause a little bit, where like, well, if you don't have a way to validate your thoughts, or if you don't have a way to figure out if you're kind of getting lost on some bullshit, maybe you need to take a step back. And
you might want to stop talking, or you might want to stop streaming on Twitch if you're talking to Destiny.
I was thinking that it would probably be fine if it was just his voice.
Maybe.
It is. Don't ask him. He probably knows better.
Don't stream voice on Twitch with Destiny. I feel like nobody's gotten clapped for even talking to you in ever. really care about you anymore. In order to stop streaming to Twitch, I have to end the entire stream.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not super worried about it because I don't have your face on.
Yeah, this is my name is Fate.
Fate. Stupid fucking name.
I wonder if one thing I wonder is so I feel like your personality traits are pretty rigid. People get mad when I say that, but I feel that. I wonder if people's like.
Do you think they're always rigid, or they're rigid by a certain age?
By a certain age, and that age is like 14 or 15, and then you kind of like slowly morph from there. But without like a lot of effort, I think it's very hard to change. I mean, you can, but it's like a transformation. Like it would have to be like a metamorphosis.
Okay. Like, but you believe like if you put in work, you could shift personality stuff.
A lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you'd have to change your environment to prime different habits and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I feel like all the stuff in psychology is pointing more and more in the direction of early development in childhood is like these are the most formative years of your life, and even like health outcomes can be related to psychological stuff that's happening early on. So it seems like those early formative years are super important.
Well, they're especially important in a large part because like, I mean, the more we're getting into things like nature and nurture, specifically in like neuroscience, where we're getting like more like geneticists involved. Sorry. Take my dog's water bottle away. Is like the interaction of epigenetics and environmental exposures is like something really critical, particularly when we're talking about like neuroplasticity and neuroscience, right? Like the genes that can be switched on, like, do you know about major depressive disorder, MDD, like much about it?
I maybe it depends on what you're about to ask me.
Okay. Do you know about the epigenetic relationship between MDD and episodes of depression and like the genes that are related to cyclic major depressive disorder?
I don't, but I feel like by asking the question, you're implying that there are probably inventories or tests you can give to parents, and you can find epigenetic factors that are predictive for children having major depressive disorder. Is my guess.
Okay, we're actually going in that direction right now.
Okay.
There's a study like out of Calgary right now that's looking at like predictive factors using like MRIs and some like blood testing to try to predict who will have an depressive episode. But what I was actually hinting at, Robert Sapolsky talks about this. This is where like a lot of people will be familiar with this concept from. There's a study that was done, I believe, in like 2018 that found that essentially there was a number of people that had basically like, I won't say the name of it, but basically this gene for serotonin. And if people had 4 to 5 major stress episodes, because most depression is caused by stress, right? You have a stressful event in your life kind of sucks, and your system kind of goes into like catastrophic failure, and you develop a form of depression. However, for people that have this genetic sensitivity, if they get 4 to 5 of those, specifically 4 to 5, not 3, not 2, 4 to 5, it can trigger basically a genetic switch to turn on, and these people will develop major depressive disorder, which is a cyclic form of depression that comes back. And these are the people, right? When you ask, why are you sad? People with a stress episode could be like, well, like my mom just died and I got fired from work and like my marriage is on the rocks, right? That's why I'm sad. Whereas people who have major depressive disorder, a lot of times they'll say, well, why are you so sad? And they'll say, I don't know. I have no good reason for it. Which is like unveiling to us like the epigenetic relationship between mental illness and environmental exposures. Because if those people have that marker, but they don't have these major like depressive episodes, they're never going to develop MDD, even though they have the genetic propensity, and their children might, because they might inherit that genetic propensity. So when we're talking about things like personality and stuff like that, this is where like I think studies into like psychedelics are really, really interesting, because major things that we know that cause like major personality shifts post like 25 is typically some sort of like religious conversion experience, right? So studies on like people who are in jail, one of the major factors that are going to predict the likelihood of them never ever offending again is experiencing like a conversion experience, like a religious conversion experience. But we know that a lot of the areas of the brain that light up when people are having religious experiences sometimes also light up when people are having psychedelic experiences. So like the possibility of like, man, the research on like trauma and depression specifically, of people taking like psychedelics with a therapist specifically, because psychedelics, the more we're understanding about them, seem to be really reliant. I'm sure you might actually have more to speak on this. The environment you're in when you're taking the drug really, really matters.
Probably more, almost more than the drug itself, or like equally, yeah.
Yeah, which obviously I had no idea. But if you take the drug in like a therapeutic setting, it's more likely to have obviously a therapeutic benefit.
Effect. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you're seeing people that have been like basically like besotted with like chronic depression and anxiety from like a trauma experience early on, do this treatment 1 to 2 times, and then immediately just be like freed from it, which is weird because it's very similar when they describe their experiences of like quote unquote freedom. It's very, have you ever heard of like freedom series from like the Christian circles?
Nope.
Okay. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
But they basically are kind of doing like they do basically intense prayer sessions that will be like 8 hours long sometimes. It's really weird. And they'll be like praying over this person to like break trauma, I don't know, spiritual woo-woo about trauma. And a lot of people, when they do come out of it for the better, which to be fair, not everyone comes out for the better in those situations, because 8 hours of like intensive prayer can be extremely distressing for certain people's bodies. But some people who come out and do experience that betterment are reflecting and like using the same type of language that people who have done like psychedelics are using to describe like their trauma shift, which is super, super interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for the religious thing too, something, because we've been arguing about getting raped and all that recently, because, you know, fun conversation.
Wait, what? Okay.
Having like a strong religious background can actually increase your tenacity when it comes to dealing with traumatic events. Like people that have higher levels of religiosity can have lower levels of trauma response, I guess, because it helps them cope with or adapt to whatever the situation is too. So, yeah.
Yeah, particularly if their religiousness has like a slightly liberal bent to it. So fundamentalists tend to do much worse overall in like mental health factors. But people who have a religion, but it's not like a super rigid dogmatic form, mostly fare better on almost all mental health scales. And yeah, they seem to pose a lot more like greater resilience to distressing events.
Yeah.
But you could argue that could be from community. Like, it's hard to distill what specifically is going on. Have you ever had, when you've done psychedelics, have you ever had a religious experiment or like religious-y, feeling-y kind of experience? I've never done psychedelics, is why I'm asking.
Sure. I mean, like, it'll feel like, it can feel spiritual, but like, I'm so fundamentally atheist, and I understand pretty well that I'm like an atheist, so I don't think I would ever have a religious experience on psychedelics. But like, you definitely have experiences where I could understand why people would think they're religious, for sure. But at least for me, I never have. I've done 2 really, really big trips on mushrooms and not even remotely like religious or maybe spiritual, you could say, but
right.
But I imagine that like there's stuff in your head that's going to be coming out based on what you already think, and you know, certain drugs will probably enhance those pre-existing thoughts, I would imagine. Like if you're religious and you do like a big psychedelic trip, you're probably gonna like talk to God, I would imagine.
Yeah. What are the like religious akin, like what are those types of experiences?
Are you asking
for you personally? Yeah, I'm just curious.
When you do really, really, really high levels of psychedelics, there's a concept called ego death. Which I think is like basically what happens. I think this is my understanding of it. Is there's kind of like there's a lot of stuff running under the hood to give you a full-on like this is a human and I have a human experience. There's a lot of stuff happening, and when you kind of break your mind a little bit by taking a lot of crazy drugs, you kind of like disconnect a lot of stuff, and you have like a perspective that's left that is like fundamentally different or altered than your normal perspective. And so you're kind of like sitting here, like looking at something that doesn't feel like a human or doesn't feel like you or doesn't have like a past. And then I think this is probably where like the feelings of like being connected to the universe and all that shit come in from.
It's very, have you ever watched the TED Talk by the neuroscientist who had a stroke on her, like basically her entire, I think, left hemisphere just like shut down?
Nope. Is it good?
It's very akin to what you're describing, of this sense of like connectiveness and like all things, like almost like Wheel of Time, like time is a circle. It's not really like linear or straight, and there's no beginning or clear end. And I am we. It's very interesting. I'd be curious on your thoughts on it. It's super well done too.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it before, so I can't really comment. But yeah, Brianna Wu. I like Brianna. I'm really appreciating the like bridge building arc that's occurring amongst like non-rabid insane people across like the political spectrum. And I think Brianna was a great example of that. I appreciate that she was able to like talk with you. I think she's got Did she talk with me yet? Have we done that yet?
Well, on a panel. You guys had a panel on Wick's panel where you guys talked back and forth at least a little bit.
Oh yeah, true. I remember.
And I think she's really seeking like nuance and like reorienting particularly the left towards like topics that actually matter. I think she's sick and tired of people quibbling over like a 1% difference. She's more interested in like greater good. Like she in many ways like sees you as somebody where she's like, I think he's kind of an asshole. Like I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I imagine like you guys have had your issues in the past, and yet
fucking hate each other.
Yeah, but fundamentally I think she like, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but like I can at least respect somebody who is trying to bridge build for like a greater like purpose, which is like, let's maybe stop quibbling about like fucking xenogenders or like these like small little unimportant things, and let's talk about like more important things, like trying to get like representatives, trying to get people turning out to vote, right? Trying to get people participating in politics. Yeah, which I can appreciate. Why? What do you think?
I truly don't know. The person that's on the panels and everything is really, 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 really cool. She's doing a lot of research, background stuff, coming into conversations. She seems to be doing that virtual thing. But on Twitter, she's just like she's always been like well, not just on Twitter, just in the past, she's been like that person that I hate that's like so divisive and quibbling. So I wonder if she like turned a new leaf, if something like actually genuinely changed recently. Or maybe she did it a while ago and I've just seen like her Twitter presence and that doesn't communicate the best type of change or something else. Or yeah, I'm really curious like what happened. Because I think most people would know her as somebody that was like contributing to that super toxic environment that she's now suddenly very against, which is cool. I mean, I used to. So I like, I'm just curious about that, I guess.
Yeah, I can't speak for her. Obviously, I don't know if there's been a shift for her, but I remember, did you ever watch my humanizing that I did with her?
Nope.
She talked a fair bit about like reflecting on Gamergate now, like how many years has it been? Almost a decade. Not quite a decade since it's occurred. And she felt I remember saying like, I feel really disappointed because I think we got so caught up in like unimportant things that we missed the point of like what actually mattered in Gamergate, which was like fair treatment and good treatment of workers, particularly female workers in gaming industries, which I thought was a very interesting reflection of hers. Yeah, I don't know. So I don't know if there's been growth. I don't know if she's changed position or if she's like, I've always had this position. I don't know. I try to be careful about how I view people on Twitter because, I know how you are on Twitter and I know how everyone is on Twitter.
Sure. I would say it wasn't just that she was like unhinged on Twitter. It's just like the stated set of beliefs seemed to be fundamentally different than what they are now. Where like I remember her siding with Keffals on like a bunch of things and like even like a while ago calling like the anybody that plays that Hogwarts Legacy game, it's like a test of character or whatever, and that was like pretty recent. So yeah, I was just curious, I guess, where she's at in her mind.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, in my experience with her, she's like always willing to be challenged and talk about opposing ideas, at least now. Like that has been my experience with her. Obviously, I've only known her for like less than a year, so that's been my experience with her exclusively, is like she's been always pretty open to me disagreeing with her on, because I disagreed with her on the Hogwarts Legacy stuff, obviously. So,
yeah. I mean, that seems to be the case. So,
yeah.
Whatever it is, I guess hopefully it keeps up.
I mean, I think it's a good bridge to build. I think there's so much potential right now for bridge building. Like increasingly, like even in the Sunday situation, seeing how many people of like all sorts of political leanings. I mean, people might be like, oh, well, it was so like decisively in your favor, but it's like people are so partisan that like sometimes facts and like reality doesn't matter, right? They'll just like side with their tribe. And I was shocked to see how many people were like willing
to hate President Sunday.
Willing to hate President Sunday, or if nothing else, willing to hear me out, despite having every motivation to dislike me. Right, like I think like poly people especially, like Polly doesn't have any reason to be like even slightly warm towards me, but just like was able to watch it and like maybe like, well, Polly also hates Sunday, so like maybe that's what was driving it. But I don't know. I just want more bridge building, and I don't know if it's possible, but I would like to see it. I want a day where you and Keffals are friends, and I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, I thought about it because now she's trying to like bridge build with me. I really don't know how I feel about everything. I feel like in a post Max Lav world, my intuition is always to like just forgive and welcome back, because it's easy to like make content and do like fun stuff again. And like me and Keffals like doing streams and like arguing and debating stuff would be funny. It would be fun content, and it might even be like fruitful, right? There might be like good conversations and stuff that come out of that. But I wonder sometimes I let people like take advantage of me way too much. I think I'm like way too into like I'm like a giver type person, and I have a really hard time setting boundaries. And I don't know if I should like enforce some type of like apology or something first, right? Technically, Keffals has done more harm to me than probably any other person alive, right? I mean, if I'm pinning my my Twitch ban on the outcome of our fights, right? Which I don't know is completely fair or not, but.
Has she ever released that like apology or redaction or anything like that?
No, but she stopped talking negatively about me. So rather than like push her into the limelight again by going through the court thing and risking anti-slap and all sorts of other shit, I just like let it be, because there was a lot of conversations that she was having about me on, or that was kind of coming up on Dylan's show, and she seemed like, I'll say respectful, in not like reopening those wounds. So I mean, technically, I guess like if that's the case, it's probably okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's hard to know because I suspect like center, which is ironic to even call like you or I in any way center in Normie land. But I would say, I'm not sure if you'd agree. At least on the internet, I've just conceded. I'll be like, sure, I'm center left, I'm moderate left, whatever. Because on the internet, reasonably, I kind of am, because I'm just not like insanely far left. Okay. I feel like there's a growing interest in that. And so sometimes when people like who I know are like ideologically different than me, sometimes I like wonder in the back of my head of like, is this just like a grift to like where the viewers are now? Like, is there just like this sense of like a growing viewership and growing popularity of like more moderated politics and more like nuanced politics? And I'm not really sure. I mean, in your situation, it's so tricky because I would say like you're this interesting dynamic where I'm gonna risk mind reading you, and you can tell me if I'm wrong.
Okay. You can also ask how I feel too. Like I'm pretty forthcoming, but go for it. Mind read me.
Okay. My suspicion. I guess I'm mind reading everyone around you more than I'm mind reading you specifically.
Okay.
I think you're somebody easy to misread because you kind of do this interesting thing where the aesthetic that you communicate to people is actually
sorry, God.
Yeah, I think you're getting it's way different than kind of how you treat people, right? Like
or way more hostile, yeah, for sure.
Not even hostile, because it's not really hostile anymore. I think you've tempered that a lot, to the point that like I suspect GGG is like begging for you to like chew into somebody at some point.
No, it's not. A lot of my new fans. The reason why I say hostile is because I have a lot of new fans that will come on and they'll be like, bro, you're like so mean and blah, 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 blah. And I like ask people like, how long have you been watching me? I think the last guy did that too. He said he started watching me in 2022 or 2020, or not 20, I think it was 2021. Yeah. But yeah, I picked up a lot of new people that have no idea like where I've come from in terms of like hostility. So even today, I think I still communicate. But I think the problem is when I'm communicating an idea to somebody, I'm like my way of speaking, it's like very dynamic and very passionate. So if I think you did something wrong, I'm like, God, you're so dumb. Like, what the f did you do that? But I think people associate that type of like tone when speaking to a friend is like, okay, I hate you and it's over forever now. Yeah, I feel like I blame. I'm gonna pull a Brittany here and appeal to my my minority upbringing. But unironically, like the Cuban half of my family, like my aunt especially and my uncle, they're like, it was just so, the communication form was so fucking violent in terms of like screaming at each other, like, you idiot, what the fuck? God, I wish I recorded some of those arguments with my aunt early on. But like afterwards, like we give each other hugs, like, okay, let's go get some coffee or like whatever. And like that was it. It was always that, like nothing. And these are like she would almost be crying in terms of how passionate she was in some of these arguments. Same things with my aunt Sarah and my grandma Cecilia too. They're like, like screaming at each other. That's just how they communicate. Yeah. But that doesn't like translate it all into. Yeah, it doesn't translate at all into like the online stuff. Everybody is like very like it's like a white middle class demeanor.
Yeah, I was gonna say white middle class people are very scared of raised voices. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously haven't seen like 2016 Nebraska Steve, so I haven't like. I mean, I've seen like clips of it, obviously, but clips are not like the best representation of like how you generally operated. Sure. One thing that I think is specifically interesting about you when I'm talking about like that aesthetic piece. Sorry, Nick's just trying to get me to see something.
What do I want you to say? Was it worth it?
It was. It was worth it.
What was it?
It's about the dog. So the aesthetic that I'm really thinking of is, okay, this is my experience of you, and I'm curious to know what you think about my experience of you. I do my best to try to see people complexly, and I try to give people large margins of error. And the whole time I'm interacting with people, especially in person, is I'm trying to read who they are and somewhat predict what I think their needs are going to be, particularly needs that they're not going to be comfortable asking for or even like necessarily know how to ask for. Because I'm always thinking about how I can like love on my friends and treat them really well, right? That's my proclivity. There are strengths and weaknesses to that.
Okay.
Your aesthetic that you communicate, it's not just an asshole anymore. There's that cold piece, but specifically, I think now especially, there's like, it sometimes feels like a disinterest. And I think people read that personally. I don't, honestly, because I try to just measure you on like the actions that you present. Right? I know you to be very generous. You've always treated me kindly. If I like have, even with the Sunday situation when I like you and I like chatted and stuff, like you were extremely like considerate of like kind of where I was landing, even though you're like, I don't know anything about the situation. I can't weigh in any way because I need to see it, right? So you're fair without like abandoning your principles. I suspect.
Oh yeah, because initially when that President Sunday stuff broke, Erudite was like, Steven, I need you to go DEFCON 7 on guys in vests with obnoxious accents.
Don't say that. Don't, please publicly don't even say that. You're joking. You're joking. It's a joke. That didn't happen. Holy fuck. That did not happen. But I think, like, especially when you first meet people, I think you get very interested in them because they're novel and unique and you like interesting things. And I think people expect that to maintain, which it can't because you get distracted by new shiny things, which is fair and understandable. But people, I think a lot of times take that personally. Like, I've been trying to look back at like your interactions with a whole bunch of different content creators and be like, damn, like, why did people like just assume the most malicious out of you? And possibly it was a different culture. Possibly like lefty vengeance culture was more popular back then. It's kind of dying out because they've cannibalized themselves so much. That's probably in part what's going on. But I suspect a lot of people, when they interact with you, they presume a complete lack of like care on your part. And I think a lot of people take lack of care personally.
I could kind of agree. I think one thing that I do is like, I tend to seek out what I consider to be very interesting people. And more often than not, once you kind of figure out like what's going on, it gets kind of like, okay, I understand this. But there are some people that are exceptional there that I think I maintain high levels of interest in, but then things still get so like Max was still a very interesting character up until the very end, but I guess he still perceived that I had no care for him at all, and shit got.
I think Max is probably a bit of a unique case. I could be wrong. How much does Max's situation map onto, like, for example, what happened between you and Hasan or you and Ian? Are they similar at all in like how they played out emotionally for the other people?
Oh, you want me to
mind read them a little bit based on what you saw? Best guess.
Yeah, but I'm gonna like virtual machine other people's feelings. I need like my full brain for that. I can't do that in the middle of the game. I try to think of how they were feeling. I'm trying to think if Vaush and Hasan were similar first. I think for Hasan, I think it was ego-driven. I think he felt like very undermined by me. Probably felt like I wasn't being very considerate of how he felt about things. Probably felt like I wasn't taking into account his perspective as much as I should have been if I was a friend. I probably came off more aggressively than he would have liked, which to him communicates not friend.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of, what did the Irish laddie bridge break over? We already were kind of separating politically. I don't know for Ian if it was as much a feelings thing or if it was just like a kind of community thing. Like, we'd already split pretty hard in terms of political ideology. The Rittenhouse thing came up where he was so obviously wrong. What was that? And then this is good. And then there was that debate over like living your principles, and the idea of like ever taking an optics L to destiny is like probably the worst thing like you could wish on any human being. Because even if you lose debates with me, at the very least you're gonna win optically. Because I'm gonna like make a child analogy or something, you know. So yeah, I think Vaush and Hasan were different, and then MrGirl. What is he doing? If I am truly to perceive MrGirl as a narcissist, I would say that the issues with him started when when we started to have disagreements. Dumb fuck. Get absolutely shit on. This guy doesn't even belong in my game. Yeah, I think the writing was on the wall as soon as I started disagreeing with him on things.
Yeah.
But MrGirl's a bit different because I think there's like truly, like I've said this before, I think he's like the only person I've truly met that like meets and exceeds that threshold for like actual narcissistic personality disorder.
What I'm curious. Remember how you said to Brittany Simon that you would trust her with your bank card?
Yeah, I wonder if I make bad decisions. I have really good feelings about, in terms of Brittany, in terms of like who I could trust.
Yeah,
but
why? What's different between Brittany?
I trust Brittany because of her personality. I trusted Max. I trust Brittany on an emotional level. I trusted Max logically. On a Machiavellian sense, like he'll never burn the bridge with me because I'm like his only connection to the world, right? Like this guy, like I have to be so valuable to him. I can't imagine he would do something that fucking stupid. From an emotional level, I don't know if there would have been as much. See,
that's so strange to me because I feel like if you're understanding Max in any way, you would know that he's an extremely like emotion-driven individual. Like he thinks emotions in many ways matter more than the logic. He doesn't give a about the logic. What he cares about is being like accurate to his emotionality. So in that way, like when all this shit like blew up, like, I was expecting this. Like this is exactly what I would expect from like not precisely the way that it blew up. Like I didn't expect like grooming, sexual cult shit allegations or whatever, but I would have expected it. Whereas like for somebody like Brittany, I know Brittany will never do that to you or to anyone that she's friends with. Like no question.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. But it's very much not how I think. And so when I'm trying to like fathom other people's minds, I have to do a lot of work to like build out like, I have to do a lot of work to build everything out to like properly analyze it. Like if you like, I understand that thought process really well. I map out exactly how our relationship ended in my second conversation with Max, where I understand that sometimes people burn bridges with me, but they don't feel like they're backstabbing me. They feel like they have some kind of like moral calling to do so, and they feel like they're in the right while doing it. So of course, this is like the direct, et cetera, et cetera. Like I laid all that out like on our second talk, and we kind of like laughed it off or whatever. That's basically exactly what happened. But for me to like, I have to do a lot of work to get to that state of mind. Yeah, because I don't think like that's insane to me. Yeah.
Huh. I wonder if in part because like you've kind of like again, I know I refer back to this all the time. I've never seen anybody capture you, I think, as accurately as I think anyone has, which is Dr. K. I don't know if you still agree with Dr. K, but he talked a lot about like kind of turning off the colors in other areas. And I'm not talking about like, and you're broken and hurting on the inside. I think you're just fucking fine having them off. No, I'm not. I'm really not. I believe you that you're just fine. Like, I think you could continue to exist like this with no problems. There's no like major like I'm not trying to max project and be like, there's deep core hidden trauma that if you just let it out, you know, you'll be broken. That may be true, but I think if you continue to exist in this way, you probably can maintain it long term, as far as like your well-being. But I wonder if that limits you in your capacity to like understand to some extent other people, particularly in the emotional realm, because people are like working with all of the colors that you've kind of like turned off. Like it would be hard to see a picture if like you just don't see like blue and red, right? And you're just like, nope, those two colors don't work. But everyone else is operating with the presumption that blue and red is there. And for a lot of people, I think specifically a lot of the emotions you cut off are like, for a lot of people, some of the biggest driving reasons why they do the shit that they do.
I don't think so, actually. I understand why you would think that way, but I think that a lot of people actually have a lot of trouble like understanding other people's minds, or it's something that I run into a lot, even if they do share some of the like same foundational kind of like patterns. It feels that way, at least. Like people, but now I'm thinking on a political level, not a personal level. Like how can somebody be pro-life and not hate women? You know, like that's like some people just can't even fathom that, which seems kind of silly to me. But I don't know if that's like there's other stuff going on there because of like the political shit, you know? Sure.
So what's different about Max than Brittany? Like you said, Brittany is somebody that you can like trust indefinitely. What's different beyond like their personality? Like why could you tell? What can you tell about Brittany that makes you trust her so much?
Tell about Brittany. You trust. Well, first let's see if this guy has upgrades. He doesn't. Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm doing a thing. Okay. Okay. Hi. What's up?
Not much. Got an answer?
I feel like Brittany has a very, very, very high level of emotional maturity and understanding. And then maybe there's a bit of arrogance on my part that I assume that if I can connect with somebody at that level, there would be no reason for either of us to each other. Yeah, it might be that. I think I have her kind of like on a bit of a pedestal because I feel like she has a lot of emotional maturity, I guess.
And so, like, because of that, you basically, what do you expect? Like, if something comes up where you guys like disagree, you basically expect her to be able to manage that well, or like, how does that map onto you trusting her specifically? Just so I'm making sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, that we can manage a disagreement without it being the end of the world, and then everything going to hell, and then like nuking everything. Yeah. Do you think, since like the Max situation specifically, that it kind of like mind you about like who you can trust? No, because it was stupid. The Lav was a bit of a wild card, but I didn't know she was going to get into the streamer world. I don't think I would have done that if I had known that she was going to be a big streamer afterwards, or like in this world. And for Max, Max was really interesting, but that was just, I projected my mind onto that because in some ways we have similar. I actually don't know if we have any similarities. The more that I think about it, I think that I mistake my ability to understand what he was saying with being similar, but I don't think we are similar almost at all. Actually, I can just understand what he's saying, and I mistook that for that. But yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So do you often mistake that, or is that just with Max where you mistook understanding what he was saying as we're akin?
I think he's interesting, and I think I'm doing a lot of work to patch up what he's saying into something that probably wasn't. I guess I was probably idealizing him quite a bit, actually. Because he'll say stuff like, for instance, like, because that's why everybody says I'm doing it out of spite. I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks. But like when I genuinely think he's a rapist. But in the past, I genuinely didn't think so. But I think it's because I was doing a lot of legwork to build out the things that he was saying, right? That like, maybe there is a time where yes means no and no means yes, and like technically that is true, and like with a high level of actual empathy, not like you've got empath in your Twitter bio, you can navigate those situations, and I consider myself pretty good at navigating those situations. And he says he is, and he says most of the right words with a little bit of patchwork, and I think I was just doing a lot of work to build him out to be somebody that was more similar to me than he actually was. And then now in retrospect, I see that like, no, he's like absolutely and completely and totally different than what I thought. But like some of his stuff will look similar on the outside, but at the end of the day, it's not. Like he'll have outbursts with Shaylin. I have outbursts in my relationship when I fuck up. Not like that ever, but like my outbursts are temper, and I usually realize afterwards like I'm in the wrong. Like I was a fucking retard, but I'm not. But he'll endlessly justify it until the day he dies.
Right.
And more importantly, everyone around him has to mirror his justification. It's not enough for him to justify it to himself. He has to like be belligerent to another party until they also agree, right? So, and that's like a fundamentally different approach to humanity. But I was super blinded by that. Probably just because he was interesting and we spoke similarly, and I understood him, and I mistook that understanding for similarity. Yeah.
Because you mentioned part of what launched us into this is you talking about like not knowing if you have enough boundaries with people, and like if you're just like kind of like too soft on people and like too forgiving. Do you see that playing into your relationship with Max at all?
A little bit, maybe. Yeah, I'm actually in some ways I'm very confrontational. In other ways, interpersonally, I'm very non-confrontational. I noticed that when I was talking to that David guy, that there's a lot of stuff that I know business-wise that works, and I do it because it obviously makes sense. But then when it comes to interpersonal stuff, I don't do it at all. When now I've learned from him, especially through some private stuff recently, that it's incredibly effective. I was really hesitant to contact basically an old like Twitch friend that I had, because I was like, it seems kind of impulsive, it seems a little bit pushy, like I don't think that this guy's gonna go for that. And he insisted, he's like, listen, if I'm gonna help you with anything, you have to do this. And I reached out to this guy, and I had like a 4-hour chat with him like 2 nights ago. And I was like, this is so stupid. Like I don't know why I didn't figure this out on my own. So interpersonally, I have problems. The thing with Max that I should have leaned on really hard was the community stuff was really disrespectful.
Right.
Him like posting 100. Was it 700 comments in 2 months?
I'm not sure. I didn't follow that. That's insane. If that's the case,
I think it was. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But like that level of like fervent like posting in my subreddit, and then like thinking that he was correct on an argument that's pretty fundamental to what I do, which is like talking to people of different political beliefs and like trying to rub that in my face. He made a post was like, I was right about this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, damn, that's like mad disrespectful. Like a lot of people I think would permanently kick you out of a community for doing this. But like I let Forethought do his little ban, and then I, so like, oh, like, maybe it will probably undo in a while. But I think I should have had a personal talk with him right at that point. Like, hey, listen, like we need to have a chat with like how you're going to function in my community.
Why didn't you?
I think I feel like it's a better private convo because everything I say nobody understands this publicly. But I think that I'm really, really, really scared about the circle jerks, about getting lost like in like too much like self-reinforcement, whatever. So I think I underplay my or I'm not as confident in my approach to some things as I should be because I'm willing to take a step back like pretty often and like think like, okay, well maybe I am being unreasonable here, maybe this is like too much on my part or whatever, when I think I shouldn't do that all the time. I'm trying to get better at organizing like when can I do this and when can I not, but it's like something I've had a big problem with, I think.
What is like your order of priorities in like navigating like boundaries with relationships and stuff? Like, do you think there's like a misorder of priorities? And like in many ways I could be wrong. Do you think that you prioritize like Max being really interesting and you're like kind of also like a bit of like your personal principle of not wanting the circle jerk over things like basic expectations about like how your friends should be treating you, especially in public domains?
I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, what I tend to prioritize is just usually other people's comfort. I think that's why I do so well in the in like the sexual shit and the relationship and the hookup stuff. I have a very good understanding of like other people's comfort levels. But obviously you can go too far with that, and I think I do, and that I don't consider like my own needs interpersonally. I have a really big problem with that. Mm-hmm. But then the problem is that I'll get upset. A lot of me and Melina's problems come down to this: is that I'll get upset when the other person is stepping over boundaries that I have, and then I'll throw like a huge temper tantrum over it. But it's not really fair because I don't assert those boundaries well, and then people cross them all the time, and it's like can I really get upset?
Right, and it like leaves the other person in this state of like almost like distress, because if they can't know your boundaries, then they're constantly having to mind read instead. Yeah,
exactly. And then they start to feel gaslit when they have problems and shit with me. And I say, well, it's not fair because of this or that or that. And like, well, how the fuck am I supposed to?
Yeah. Do you think that you have an issue knowing like what you need in relationship? Like what your boundaries would even need to be, or asks that you need to make?
No, I have a pretty good understanding of it. I never know if it's fair or not. Because typically when I'm asserting boundaries in a relationship, usually what the other party counters with is, it sounds like you just want to be single. So I never know like if the things that I'm asking for are too much.
What about like maybe we'll just focus on like Max, just because I don't want to like, or whatever one you want to focus on. But like, what made you hesitant that like your needs or like boundaries in there were like less important than like not having a circle jerk, for example? Like what happened in your mind where you're like, I don't know if it's important?
Well, because I mean, I empathize with his point of view. Like, it's gonna suck. Oh my. It's gonna suck if you have a community that you feel is dogpiling you. You've got a guy that you consider your friend, and then, like on top of all of this, like it feels like it feels like a whole community's turning on you, and that basically is being sanctioned by somebody that you thought you had like a close relationship with, basically.
Right.
Which is, from his perspective, that's essentially what happened, right?
Yeah, it's just unfortunate because. This is something that I've noticed about you. I'm curious what you think about this. You're an incredibly considerate person that I think a lot of people don't realize is considerate. Would you agree with that, or am I missing the mark?
If people have personal experience with me, they learn that very quickly. I guess they forget something. Yeah. Right. Yeah, because like we have combos with Max where he's like crying because of like how nice I've been in terms of like platforming him and everything. Mm-hmm. I think there was a time when him and Melina, I shouldn't have put my meters over here. Him and Melina were having a really personal exchange over how I thought it was sad that he was kind of like lost in this nowhere land where none of his videos got very many views, but he's like one of the most artistic creators I've ever seen. And that was like, I thought that was really sad. And he seemed like pretty touched by that recognition. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, yeah, people throw away things in a really bizarre manner. Me and Melina both have tried to figure that out, because Melina's a pretty cool person too. Mm-hmm. But we'll have friends that like, I bet he's got mines buried over here. Yeah. Oh my god. Okay, he has a lot of mines buried over here. People seem quick to like not care much about that sometimes. I don't know why. Jesus.
Do you have any guesses as to like why? Like what causes people to like it sounds like they very quickly go to undervaluing the gratitude that they at least previously showed the moment like some sort of tension or slight occurs.
I truly have no idea. Me and Melina have been backstabbed by so many people. But we're like probably some of the coolest people you'd ever hang out with, especially in this horrible fucking entertainment world. So I don't know what causes people to flip so hard. I really don't know. I'm not sure. But and they always come back later too because they realize it. They're like, okay, yeah, fuck, these people all suck. Like I don't know why we acted goofy. But then like obviously once somebody breaks that boundary, you can't really like, take them back.
Well, can you not take them back?
It's hard to because if they've got the propensity to fuck you over one time, I mean, they theoretically could do it again. And then it also feels different too if somebody's like crossed a certain line, like, but now they realize like, oh fuck, maybe I should have stayed friends with you guys. Like, well, fuck you.
Right. Do you, when people are like trying to come back, do you ever like make asks of like what coming back would look like?
I could, but I don't think Melina could. Because in her mind, like just having the propensity of doing some of the things that people have done, like already kind of like sullies it.
Yeah. Interesting. So not really sure why people backstab you. Do you guys think you get backstabbed on a higher than average amount for streamers?
I don't know, actually. That's a good question. It feels like everybody's like really snaky to everybody. So it could be like just an industry norm, and I'm just doing a bad job at like perceiving that it is.
Yeah.
Or because it's happening to me, it feels more personal. Maybe.
Possibly. I mean, what size do you think you would need to, somebody's platform would need to get to? Because I imagine this would be in part incentivized by like the size of the content creator. Like you and Melina both have very large platforms, so it's possible that like the platform size itself is incentivizing it. Do you think that that would be like a factor?
I don't know. When I was doing that part of my manifesto where I was like going through like things that I've done for people and then seeing how they f me over at the end, I was pretty surprised. Like the website thing is pretty surprising. That's pretty insane. That there's a whole industry built around like building off of a website that I kind of gave to the world for free.
Yeah.
And every single person that uses it like wants me literally like deleted from the internet and possibly killed. That's like a pretty.
It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah.
Which is why, like, I don't know what it is. Like, I have my own theories, but I am curious about like the aesthetic that you communicate. Because I agree that you're an incredibly considerate person, but I would say most people are very emotional, right? And they care way more about the way things feel than the way things that they actually are. That would be my guess. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, probably would. Sounds pretty tippy, so.
Tippy?
I'd agree. Yep, tip.
And so in the case of like why they're so willing to throw away what was is because of how things feel now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes interpersonally. I've said this before that like I have to do, I've got to try really hard to keep in mind like certain behaviors that I can do to communicate interest to people because I tend to, through body language or whatever, I can communicate way more disinterest than I ever mean to. It's really, really, really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, because in a lot of ways, like how you portray yourself is how people will feel about you. So if you're like communicating disinterest, then they're going to feel that you're disinterested. And most people aren't going to like extrapolate that out to like, oh, that's probably just his stuff. Like they're going to take it personally. Of being like, well, he's like super considerate of me and very generous, kind, like shares his platform. But then when we like spend time together, it's just like disinterested, doesn't really seem to care, things like that.
Do you ever think about any of these things or no? Or
Me
do you do this
personally?
pretty naturally? Yeah, intuitively.
Think about which parts, like you specifically?
No, like, yeah, how often do you think about me at night? No, like communicating like interest to people or whatever.
Not as often as my mom does. Yeah, I think about the emotional aesthetic that I communicate to people a fair bit. Not as much as Nick does. I think Nick is better at navigating this more naturally because I'm pretty keenly aware of it. I just sometimes don't care. Like I sometimes will like Nick is always trying to like navigate towards like making sure that he's communicating the aesthetic that he wants people to feel because that is how he feels to some degree as well. Sometimes I'm just like too lazy essentially, like where I'm aware that if I like change my tone here or anything that I would probably get better positive outcomes and they would probably like me a fair bit more. I'm just like, I'm sorry, like if you can't take me like this, I'm too busy. I don't want it. I'm good. Is more so how I operate. But I I suspect that my aesthetic that I communicate is pretty similar to how I feel about things. I have a harder time of like getting myself to feel some sort of way that I think is probably would be a better way to feel about it, if you know what I mean.
Gotcha, sure.